I want to say a few words about the events of the last few days.
Chilling words from illegal migrants threatening a takeover has left Gavin Newsom in a silent panic state, yet he takes actions.
What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before.
The governor now battles a budget crisis, freezes Medi-Cal enrollments, and lashes out at Trump's reckless deportation blitz.
California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, but instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records and people with final deportation orders, a strategy both parties have long supported, this administration is pushing mass deportations.
But what if whispers of a full-blown takeover aren't exaggeration, but prophecy? The next revelation changes everything. California's immigration reality check forces Newsom into budget crisis mode.
The state of California is not a sanctuary state. There is no sanctuary anywhere.
Gavin Newsom might just be experiencing what political insiders are calling a full-scale panic attack. And frankly, who can blame him? The California governor who once proudly declared his state a sanctuary for all is now staring at the harsh mathematics of his own progressive agenda. California hosts approximately 10.6 million immigrants, accounting for 27% of the state's total population. A staggering figure that would make any governor's calculator smoke. The sheer scale of California's immigrant population puts the state in a league of its own. We're not talking about modest numbers here. We're discussing a demographic that comprises more than 1 in every 4 Californians. This proportion is the highest in the nation, significantly exceeding the national average of 12%. To put this in perspective, California alone hosts about 20% of the entire United States immigrant population. That's like saying one state is carrying the demographic weight of an entire small country.
This is all because Gavin Newsom was getting criticized because there's that car accident on the Florida Turnpike where this guy, this illegal immigrant's doing the U-turn, barely even has an expression after he realizes the minivan doesn't have time to stop and slams underneath his truck. Look at that. Three people died in that, killed 3 people.
But here's where the rubber meets the road. These aren't just statistics on a spreadsheet. Of the 10.6 million immigrants, 55% are naturalized U.S. citizens, 28% are legal permanent residents, and 17% are undocumented. That undocumented portion represents about 1.8 million people who, while contributing significantly to the economy, also place unprecedented demands on state services that receive 0 federal funding support.
What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before.
The economic impact tells a story that would make even the most seasoned economists' head spin. Immigrants comprise 1/3 of California's workforce, with 44% of manufacturing jobs, 40% of construction roles, and 28% of long-term care positions. In agriculture, you know, that little industry that feeds the nation, 70% of workers are immigrants, with 50% being undocumented. Silicon Valley, California's crown jewel of innovation, operates with 68% of its workforce being foreign-born.
We desperately need immigrants in this country, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. I look at America as my home, and I wouldn't let anybody into my house if I didn't know who they were. Would you?
Dr. Phil, I think the vast majority of people would find particularly rational, but you have to acknowledge, and I don't say this lightly, I say this with intimate familiarity. I mean, we've had quote unquote wellness checks in the public schools. We've had some folks that are going to immigration courts that are being picked up in and around immigration courts. There's been a chilling impact across the country, not just in states like California, but a lot of day laborers picked up in California. We had a federal judge intervene. But I do appreciate there's an intensity of anxiety and a lot of rhetoric that is thrown around that is not nuanced. And I don't know that.
Now here's the kicker that probably keeps Newsom up at night. Undocumented immigrants alone contribute $7,000 per person annually, totaling $23 billion in California. They're generating $151 billion in economic output, supporting local businesses through consumer spending that rivals small nations' entire economies. Yet despite these massive contributions, the state bears the full burden of providing services without a penny of federal assistance. The fiscal mathematics become even more jaw-dropping when you consider the potential consequences of mass deportations. Economists estimate deportations could remove 1 to 2 million workers, costing California $275 billion in wages and $23 billion in taxes. Agriculture could see 20 to 30% price hikes, affecting 1 in 3 U.S. households. Construction and healthcare sectors, where immigrants make up 40% and 28% of the workforce respectively, face potential collapse scenarios that would ripple through the entire state economy. Newsom Newsom's stance on immigration has been nothing short of theatrical in its progressive grandstanding. During Immigrant Heritage Month in June 2025, he proclaimed that immigrants are the heartbeat of California's economy and diversity, highlighting their role in tech, agriculture, and healthcare. This wasn't just political rhetoric. Newsom has backed up his words with unprecedented policy actions. The governor expanded Medi-Cal to all low-income undocumented adults in 2024, covering 700,000 plus people at a cost of $3.1 billion annually. He signed legislation creating sanctuary state protections, allocated $50 million for legal aid to fight deportations, and launched statewide task forces to distribute Know Your Rights resources. When Trump's deportation machinery cranked into high gear in 2025, Newsom didn't just resist, he declared war. In September 2025, Newsom signed 5 bills directly targeting ICE's deportation strategies, making California the first state to implement such comprehensive restrictions. These weren't symbolic gestures, they were legal roadblocks designed to throw wrenches into federal enforcement operations. But opposing Trump's deportation plans comes with a price tag that would make even California's tech billionaires wince. Newsom has consistently warned that Trump's 2025 mass deportation plans could remove 1 to 2 million workers, costing California $275 billion in wages and $23 billion in taxes. He's framed these deportations as an economic catastrophe, humanitarian crisis, and threat to democratic values. Yet despite all this progressive posturing and economic cheerleading, Newsom found himself facing a fiscal reality that no amount of political spin could disguise. The very programs he championed were hemorrhaging money at rates that threatened the state's entire budget structure.
California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, but instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records and people with final deportation orders, a strategy both parties have long supported, this administration is pushing mass deportations.
Enter the moment that probably gave Newsom his first gray hairs, or at least a few more. In May 2025, facing a $12 billion budget deficit, Newsom proposed freezing new Medi-Cal enrollments for undocumented adults aged 19 and older, set to take effect as early as January 2026. This wasn't just any policy adjustment. This was Newsom essentially putting his signature progressive achievement on ice. The numbers behind this decision paint a picture of fiscal chaos that would make any governor sweat. The 2024 Medi-Cal expansion added an unexpected $8.5 billion in annual costs due to rapid enrollment growth, 700,000 plus new participants in the first year alone. That's not a typo. $8.5 billion more than projected, which in government spending terms is like expecting to buy a sandwich and accidentally purchasing a small country. Newsom's overall $322 billion budget proposal for 2025 to 26 incorporated $3.5 billion in immediate cuts and $8.8 billion in delayed spending, with the Medi-Cal freeze as a key component to close that $12 billion deficit hole that seemed to grow larger every time budget analysts looked at it. The governor's explanation for this dramatic policy reversal was a masterclass in political damage control. No state has done more than California to support immigrants, and that's a point of pride. But because of the $16 billion Trump slump and higher than expected healthcare utilization, the state must take difficult but necessary steps to ensure fiscal stability and preserve the long-term viability of Medi-Cal for all Californians. The term Trump slump became Newsom's favorite explanation for everything going wrong fiscally. He attributed $16 billion in lost revenue from January 2025 to June 2026 to President Trump's tariffs on imported goods, which disrupted California's trade-dependent economy. The state's volatile stock markets and reduced consumer spending were all laid at Trump's feet, creating what Newsom called a perfect storm of external economic pressures. But the freeze wasn't just about stopping new enrollments. Newsom initially proposed a $100 monthly premium for all adults aged 19 and older with unsatisfactory immigration status, effective January 1, 2027. This would apply to both new and existing enrollees, essentially asking the very people he claimed to champion to pay for the privilege of healthcare access. After legislative negotiations, this was reduced to $30 per month, but the message was clear. Even sanctuary states have their limits. The policy details reveal just how desperate California California's fiscal situation had become. The freeze targets new applications for full-scope Medi-Cal from undocumented adults ages 19 to 59, halting eligibility for state-funded comprehensive coverage starting January 1, 2026. Existing enrollees, approximately 1.6 million undocumented adults who joined since the 2024 expansion, would retain coverage, but the door was slamming shut on future applicants. What makes this particularly striking is the speed of the reversal. Just 1 year after California's pioneering 2024 expansion, which extended full-scope Medi-Cal coverage to all low-income undocumented residents regardless of age, Newsom was essentially admitting the program was financially unsustainable. The state that proudly became the second after Oregon to offer such comprehensive health insurance was now backtracking faster than a politician caught in a scandal. The freeze's fiscal impact tells the story of a state drowning in its own generosity. The policy aimed to save the state over $5 billion by fiscal year 2028 to 29, with Medi-Cal costs ballooning to $12.4 billion annually for undocumented coverage. That's $11.1 billion in state-funded expenses, plus $1.3 billion in federal contributions for eligible portions, numbers that would make even the most progressive budget analyst reach for antacids. As Newsom signed the compromise budget on June 27, 2025, his words carried the weight of a progressive politician facing harsh reality. While California has prided itself on offering Medi-Cal to many non-citizens, we also put a limit on it. He called it a bruising blow to his universal healthcare vision, but insisted it was essential for fiscal survival. This dramatic reversal sets the stage for an even more explosive confrontation between Newsom and the federal government, a battle that would make their previous skirmishes look like polite disagreements. Newsom's war against Trump and ICE reaches fever pitch. The gloves came off completely when Newsom decided that playing defense wasn't enough. He was going on the offensive, and Trump was about to feel the full fury of California's progressive machinery. What started as budget complaints quickly escalated into a full-scale political war that would make their previous disagreements look like friendly family dinners. Newsom's finger-pointing reached epic proportions as he blamed Trump for everything short of California's earthquakes. During his May 14, 2025 budget revision press conference, Newsom declared that the $16 billion Trump slump and higher-than-expected healthcare utilization forced the state into difficult fiscal decisions. But this wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. Newsom was essentially arguing that Trump's policies were sabotaging California's humanitarian efforts.
He's a stone-cold liar. I respect the presidency. I've tried to have an open hand with him, tried to work with him. You can't work with Donald Trump. You can only work for him. And I will not. I refuse to work for Donald Trump.
We have a president that's been reckless in terms of assaulting those growth engines like trade and tourism. It's created a climate of deep uncertainty, Newsom declared with the dramatic flair of someone who had clearly rehearsed this speech in front of a mirror. The governor painted a picture of federal economic warfare, claiming that tariffs, market volatility, and rising state healthcare costs had led to a projected $12 billion budget gap. The timing of these accusations was particularly telling. By May 2025, California faced an additional $12 billion shortfall on top of previously addressed gaps, pushing total budget remedies to over $27 billion, instead of acknowledging that perhaps expanding expensive programs during uncertain times might not have been the wisest fiscal strategy. Newsom doubled down on blaming external forces. This is a time of just extraordinary uncertainty, Newsom proclaimed, linking tariffs and market volatility directly to the need for Medi-Cal cuts. But here's the kicker. When pressed about the 5.8% budget impact being pretty mild, Newsom admitted they needed to tighten things up, but maintained that Trump's tariffs are the major factor. The governor's rhetoric reached peak drama when he signed the compromise budget on June 27, 2025. California's fundamental values don't change just because the federal winds have shifted, he declared, as if California was some sort of progressive fortress under siege by barbarian hordes from Washington. But Newsom's blame game was just the opening act. His real war was against ICE operations in California, and he wasn't pulling any punches in this fight. The governor's opposition to ICE deportations transformed from political posturing into legislative warfare that would make military strategists proud. In September 2025, Newsom signed a package of 5 bills directly targeting ICE's deportation strategies, essentially turning California into a bureaucratic obstacle course for federal agents. The centerpiece of this legislative assault was the No Secret Police Act, which bans federal and local officers, including ICE agents, from wearing masks or face coverings to conceal identities during enforcement actions. Newsom signed this with characteristic theatrical flair, asking, "What are you afraid of?" as if he was confronting masked villains in a superhero movie rather than federal law enforcement officers. The timing couldn't have been more provocative. Newsom signed these bills during a high-profile event in Los Angeles amid ongoing ICE raids, essentially declaring war on federal enforcement while agents were actively conducting operations in his state. The optics were unmistakable. California's governor was literally standing in opposition to federal law enforcement. But the mask ban was just one weapon in Newsom's anti-ICE arsenal. The Safe Schools Act prohibits ICE from entering school campuses without a warrant or court order, while additional legislation bars ICE from non-public areas of healthcare facilities without a warrant. These weren't just symbolic gestures. They were legal roadblocks designed to make federal enforcement as difficult and bureaucratic as possible. The governor didn't stop at legislation. Newsom launched a statewide task force to monitor ICE raids, distribute Know Your Rights resources, and coordinate with faith leaders and businesses. During a July 2025 visit to raided Los Angeles establishments, he shared these tools while highlighting the economic harm, with some businesses losing 20% of their revenue. Newsom's criticism of ICE operations became a daily drumbeat of condemnation that would make opposition researchers jealous of his consistency. In a June 6, 2025 statement, he declared that continued chaotic federal sweeps across California to meet an arbitrary arrest quota are as reckless as they are cruel. The governor's social media presence became a constant stream of anti-ICE commentary. In a June 23 X post, he quoted Joe Rogan saying, "These ICE raids are a ******** kin nuts. If Trump had said we're gonna go to Home Depot and arrest everyone, they said they were getting rid of criminals. And now Home Depots are raided? Crazy." Using a podcaster's profanity-laced criticism to make his point was peak Newsom, simultaneously highbrow and populist, serious and theatrical. His June 10, 2025 speech transcript revealed the depth of his criticism, but instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records, this administration is pushing mass deportations, indiscriminately targeting hardworking immigrant families, regardless of their roots or risk. The governor was essentially accusing the federal government of betraying its own stated priorities. Newsom's most pointed attacks focused on what he called ICE's quota system. In a June 17, 2025 X post, he declared, "All that matters is numbers, pure numbers, quantity over quality." The Trump administration's mandate to arrest 3,000 illegal migrants per day is forcing ICE agents to deprioritize going after dangerous criminals. The governor was painting federal agents as bureaucratic box checkers more interested in statistics than public safety. The militarization argument became another favorite Newsom talking point. In a June 17, 2025 X post, he highlighted that four-star generals, admirals serving from JFK to Obama say Los Angeles, ICE protests don't warrant deployment of National Guard to California. By invoking respected military leaders, Newsom was arguing that even the Pentagon's own alumni thought Trump's tactics were excessive. Perhaps most damaging was Newsom's attack on ICE's use of healthcare data. On June 13, 2025, he declared that sharing Medicaid beneficiary information with the Department of Homeland Security, which is itself legally dubious, will jeopardize the safety, health, and security of those who will undoubtedly be targeted by this abuse. This wasn't just policy criticism. Newsom was accusing the federal government of violating patient privacy for deportation purposes. The governor's rhetoric reached fever pitch during his September 20, 2025 bill signing ceremony. Standing before cameras, he declared that immigrants have rights and we have the right to stand up and push back, while describing federal immigration officials as operating like the largest private police force in history. These weren't just political sound bites. They were accusations of authoritarianism that carried serious implications. When a September 2025 shooting at a Dallas ICE facility occurred, VP J.D. Vance blamed Newsom's rhetoric for inciting violence, but Newsom countered that his words protected rights without endorsing violence. The effectiveness of Newsom's strategy became clear in the numbers. ICE raids had arrested 15,000 people statewide by September 2025, with 70.8% being non-criminals. Medi-Cal enrollment dropped 8% as fear spread through immigrant communities, while businesses reported $100 million in losses. But this war of words and legislation was building towards something much bigger, a personal feud between two of America's most combative politicians that would dominate headlines and reshape the political landscape in ways neither probably anticipated. The ultimate political showdown between Newsom and Trump. What started as policy disagreements has morphed into the most vicious state-federal political feud in modern American history, complete with lawsuits, meme wars, and enough personal attacks to fuel a reality TV series. The Newsom-Trump saga reads like a political thriller where both protagonists are convinced they're the hero of the story. The roots of this epic confrontation trace back to Trump's first presidency, when Newsom, then lieutenant governor, denounced Trump's border wall as a stain on our nation's history and inhumane, vowing California would resist. This wasn't just political posturing. It was a declaration of war from California's progressive leadership against what they saw as federal overreach. As governor from 2019, Newsom signed SB 54 sanctuary law protections, prompting Trump to withhold $3 billion in wildfire aid and call California a sanctuary for criminals and failed state. The battle lines were drawn: California's sanctuary policies versus Trump's deportation agenda, with billions of dollars and millions of lives hanging in the balance. The relationship briefly thawed during January 2025's Los Angeles wildfires, when Newsom met Trump at the White House on January 24th, seeking federal aid for disasters that killed 29 people and destroyed over 10,000 homes. Trump approved $2.5 billion in relief, but warned, "End sanctuary chaos or aid stops. Your policies invite illegals and fires." Even during natural disasters, these two couldn't resist turning tragedy into political theater. But any hope of détente evaporated faster than morning fog in San Francisco when Trump launched Operation Secure America in 2025. ICE's Operation Sentinel raided Los Angeles sites, including Home Depots and factories, arresting 1,200 people, with 70% being non-criminals. The raid sparked massive protests that blocked freeways and resulted in 50 injuries, giving Trump the excuse he needed for his next escalation. On June 7, 2025, Trump federalized 2,000 California National Guard troops and 700 Marines without Newsom's consent, citing insurrection under federal law. This wasn't just political hardball. This was Trump essentially declaring martial law in California's largest city. Newsom's response was swift and furious. On June 9th, he sued in San Francisco federal court, alleging posse comitatus violations and militarization for theater. At a rally, he warned, "This isn't just LA, it's a blueprint for authoritarianism. Trump's dragnet targets families, not threats." Trump's retaliation was characteristically over the top. "News come incites riots. Guard saves LA from anarchy. Arrest him if he obstructs." The President of the United States was literally calling for the arrest of a sitting governor, crossing lines that would have been unthinkable in previous administrations. The legal battle became a ping-pong match of injunctions and appeals. Judge Charles Breyer initially ruled the deployment illegal on June 11th, but the Ninth Circuit stayed the decision on June 12th, allowing limited military use. By September 2nd, Breyer ruled the Guard deployment illegal statewide, prompting Trump's appeal. But the real fireworks began when Newsom decided to fight fire with fire. On August 14th, 2025, he announced Proposition 50, a November special election initiative for anti-gerrymander maps, raising $10 million while declaring, "Trump rigs Texas. We fight back democratically." This was Newsom essentially threatening to out-gerrymander Trump, turning election manipulation into a mutually assured destruction scenario. The personal attacks reached schoolyard levels of pettiness. On July 15th, during a podcast appearance, Newsom called Trump a son of a bee for displaying weakness as strength. Trump's response was equally mature: foul-mouthed failure. The feud reached peak absurdity during Newsom's September 23, 2025 appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He doubled down on calling Trump a son of a bee, explaining that absurdity demands parody, while unveiling anti-MAGA merchandise, including "Newsom was right" caps. Two of America's most powerful politicians were essentially having a merchandising war. The meme warfare escalated beyond anything political consultants could have imagined. Trump posted AI-generated images of Newsom wearing Trump 2028 inches hats, while Newsom replied with Trump depicted as a diaper tantrum toddler. American democracy had devolved into two middle-aged men trading photoshopped insults like teenagers on social media. The stakes became deadly serious following a September 24, 2025 shooting at a Dallas ICE facility that killed one person and injured two others. VP J.D. Vance blamed Newsom's rhetoric for inciting violence, drawing parallels to other politically motivated attacks. Newsom's response was defiant: "Condemn violence. Trump pardons cop beaters while blaming us." The current status of this political death match is almost surreal in its intensity. The legal case, Newsom v. Trump, is scheduled for Ninth Circuit appeals hearing on October 1, 2025, with the Guard partially withdrawn but 500 Marines remaining on standby. DHS sued California on September 22nd over the mask ban law, which becomes effective January 1, 2026. ICE raids continue with 15,000 arrests statewide as of September 2025, while Medi-Cal enrollment has dropped 8% due to deportation fears. years. Newsom's Proposition 50 polls at 55% support, while he tours blue states raising money for his resistance fund that has collected $200 million. Trump has threatened $5 billion in Medicaid cuts for California, while fundraising $50 million off Crush Newscom rallies. Both men are essentially using each other as fundraising foils, turning their mutual hatred into political profit. The economic costs are staggering. California businesses have reported $100 million in losses from ICE raids, while the state faces potential federal funding cuts that could reach into the tens of billions. Newsom's warning that deportations could cost California $275 billion in wages and $23 billion in taxes annually isn't just political rhetoric. It's an economic catastrophe scenario that would dwarf most recessions. Politically, this feud has transformed both men into national figures in ways they probably never anticipated. National polls show Newsom as a 25% Democratic favorite for 2028, largely based on his resistance to Trump's agenda. Meanwhile, Trump leverages the conflict for his midterm election strategy, portraying California as the epitome of everything wrong with democratic governance. As of late September 2025, there's no end in sight to this political bloodbath. Both sides are preparing for more lawsuits, more raids, and more escalations that could fundamentally reshape the balance of power between states and the federal government. What started as a policy disagreement has become a constitutional crisis wrapped in a personal vendetta, with millions of immigrant lives hanging in the balance while two politicians wage war for the cameras in the history books. The only certainty is that this feud will continue to dominate headlines, drain taxpayer resources, and serve as a stark reminder of how personal politics can trump policy in modern America. Thanks for watching. For more of such eye-opening content, click on the card showing on the screen.